Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we have the unfortunate news of the passing of Yaphet Kotto. Um, Now, a lot of people are going to know him from a couple really big roles that he had. I'm mainly going to talk about three films in his filmography and kind of go over a couple of little things too as well. It's important to note that even though here's the thing. Yaphet Kotto was an extremely good actor. I would put him on par with a lot of other actors in his era. The problem was is that he just never really got the exposure that a lot of the other ones got. He didn't get as a big leading role like James Earl Jones did in Conan the Barbarian. He didn't get stuff like that in a lot of cases. The biggest one was him playing Parker in Alien. The rest, a lot of his other projects on the big screen anyway, were a lot smaller. But really his presence was on television a lot of the time in terms of a leading presence. He guest starred on I think almost every single major television show from the 70s and 80s. Gunsmoke, Bonanza, oh god, The A Team, Hill Street Blues. So many just shows that he was just doing for work. Um, which is another thing that you kind of find common among relatively good actors is that they don't really care a lot of the times what work they get. They're perfectly comfortable playing any kind of role. Which that's the other thing too is he was very versatile in his ability to play both on the good and bad side of the character spectrum. And it probably starts out, again, he came from theater for the most part. He actually got his first theater role as starring in a production of Othello in New York City. He also did act on Broadway starting in 1969, so he was a Broadway actor, which is, again, a lot of the things that people don't really mention about him. Um, and he wound up actually just as a kind of a funny little side note, he actually did wind up doing a theatrical version of Othello in 1980, and he also played Othello in that as well, which is kind of an interesting callback to earlier in his acting career. But really, he didn't start breaking into mainstream film until about 1973, which was when he starred as the main antagonist in Roger Moore's first outing as James Bond in Live and Let Die. And the antagonist was Mr. Big. But that was an interesting one because the difference is that when you think of Yaphet Kotto, when you think of like a lot of his roles, he's physically imposing. He's a large man. He's very tall, broad shoulders. And everybody knows him from movies like Alien, where he's kind of the biggest guy in the group. He's the strong guy. Um, yeah, a lot of the other people, men in that movie, are very kind of stringy. John Hurt and Tom Skerritt and the rest. Um, but in Live and Let Die, he's not really physically scary. He's mentally imposing. He's a lot like a lot of other Bond villains, like a Goldfinger or a Doctor No, in the sense that back then they had kind of a formula with these movies. But the difference here is that this was an untested version of James Bond because they hadn't had a different version up until that point. That was Roger Moore's first outing. So I think that was when Sean Connery had just handed off the reins and stopped playing Bond. But I think Yaphet Kotto made that movie much, much better. I think that a lot of stuff in that movie made it really, really memorable, but he definitely added to that. Now, the next role, which is probably the one that people know him for the most, is Parker in Alien, which I already mentioned before. And when he plays Parker in Alien, again, he's completely flipped from the character that we saw in Live and Let Die. Again, this was also 6 years later, but in 1979. But he's a complete flip where now he's on, I guess, what you would consider technically the good side. It's really just the people trying to survive in the alien death machine. But he's a relatively good person. He helps people throughout the movie. He saves Sigourney Weaver from getting strangled to death by Ian Holm. So I mean, he's at least doing things that you would consider him a good character in that movie. And on top of that, he's very physically imposing in that film. You have the shots of him, especially near the end with the flamethrower and stuff, and the only shame is that we do get a lot cut out of when the alien actually does kill him. We just get a few little scenes here and there. Um, but I thought he did really well. I think that a lot of that was very natural. It felt like because there's scenes in that movie like at the beginning, and I think this actually was an ad lib scene. The scene at the beginning right after they wake up and they all start eating stuff, and Yvette Koto makes he makes a pussy joke, which is pretty funny, and then the women kind of look over at him like disgusted. But it's like, okay, this actually feels like somebody just like taped them having lunch on set. This was actually kind of amusing. And I think that is actually what they did. They basically let them ad lib the whole scene. Um, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I I like that because it showed that he has a sense of humor. He's a real person. He could make this character believable as a real person, and that's really the best sign of an actor is the ability to do that. And again, Parker was one of the more entertaining characters in that film. And the good thing about Alien 2 is you had a very good director, even though he was kind of unproven at that point, a very good director in Ridley Scott to kind of direct him and accentuate the fact that he is a good actor. Um, and then the last one I'm going to bounce on is, or I'm going to touch on, is The Running Man. Now, The Running Man is a cheesy Arnold Schwarzenegger movie from 1987, and it's based off of a book by Richard Bachman, who's the alternate pen name for Stephen King. Um, and basically, the book is a million times different than the movie. The movie is 100% 80s fine, but it is kind of interesting because it's more of a meta film. It's a film that recognizes exactly what it is, and they kind of it parodies what they know they are and projects it on like a weird evil scale. And you have Richard Dawson coming in as the main bad guy, Killian and stuff. But Yaphet Kotto's character of Lambert, he has some pretty good moments in that film. And again, he's very physically demanding because the other thing is he has to contend in that movie in a scene with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is a massive dude. And in order to kind of put those two on semi equal terms, I mean, semi equal, Arnold Schwarzenegger could probably rip him to pieces anyway. But in terms of size and scope of the actual physical actor, you had to get somebody like Yaphet Kotto to play that part because if you didn't, there just wasn't any way of getting around it. Um, they already had problems getting people just to be a stunt double for Arnold in Hollywood at various points, especially early in his career, because there just was nobody built like him. So to be able to put another large body next to him was good for that role. And again, the physical acting I liked in that movie. It was pretty good. And Yaphet Kotto, that was at a point in his career where he was kind of doing these schlocky like science fiction and horror movies. A little bit later on after that, he was also in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, Freddy's Dead. And he just, at one point, I believe he beats Freddy Krueger with like a baseball bat or something. But it was just kind of like a little goofy thing in his career where he was doing some of those movies. And even though it is kind of goofy, he's able to play it so that it's somewhat believable. Again, the actions themselves are still kind of goofy, but he never breaks character. It's never like a point where you can tell that he knows he's being as ridiculous as he thinks he is. He's trying to sell this thing the whole way, and he's doing a pretty damn good job of it usually. But I like The Running Man. There's a few really good scenes in that. He actually survives a good amount into the movie, but his whole thing is he kind of he does steal the show a little bit from Arnold Schwarzenegger because he kind of gets the motivation to Arnold to go kill Richard Dawson when he takes a chainsaw for Arnold Schwarzenegger. But again, I'm going on maybe a little bit too long about this, but I love Yaphet Kotto as an actor. His anytime you get to see him in a role, it's usually either extremely amusing or in either case, it's usually extremely good. Uh, you know, Especially when he gets to play around and do different things. Even though he was kind of pigeonholed eventually into that kind of typecasting of, oh yeah, it's the big guy coming in to do various things. He still had a way to with other roles to accentuate his ability to act, and I always like that about him. But again, sad news today. Yaphet Kotto has passed away at the age of 81. And I want you guys to put down below, anything that you think, your favorite Yaphet Kotto movie, your favorite part. that he played or anything like that, put that in the comments below as usual. I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you